Welcome to the Cultivating Business Growth podcast, bringing you bi-weekly discussions designed to help you grow your business and create the lifestyle you desire. Elevate your business with proven strategies from virtual CFOs, CPAs, and business advisors. We discuss real-world challenges solved with actionable steps that get you the results you need both in business and building the life you deserve.
Welcome to episode 160 of the Cultivating Business Growth podcast, brought to you by PJS Co CPAs, soon to be Willow Virtual CFOs. I'm Katina Peters. I'm CPA, CGMA, and Virtual CFO. I'm going to be your host for this episode. So today we're very excited. We have a special guest with us. So joining us today is John Meibers. He's the Vice President and General Manager of Deltek ComputerEase. With over 30 years of experience in the construction software industry, John is passionate about helping contractors streamline their financial and project management process. He leads Deltek ComputerEase in providing industry-specific solutions that empower construction businesses to operate more efficiently and profitably, which is what we always, as accountants, like to hear, right? So welcome, John. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Katina. Yeah, happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Like I said, efficiency, making things easy, that's what us accountants like to do. We love our processes and our systems and things like that. So I love talking about this stuff. And we talk especially with our construction clients as they grow and get to a larger, scaling size, they need to be looking at these industry specific softwares. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So do you want to just give us a little bit of background on you and what you'd like to share about ComputerEase, and then we'll get into some questions?
Yeah, sure. Would be happy to do so. So yeah, I started my my career in construction many years ago now when I worked for a large mechanical contractor, and shortly after I joined that company, we went on a search for a industry-specific software solution, and we're fortunate enough at that time to come across ComputerEase, and just was such a game changer for us when we went to something that was built specifically for our business, and we weren't using a what I'll call a generic software solution, and it really brought the things to the table that we needed. We needed help managing, creating our WIP schedules, managing our prevailing wage, and producing certified payroll reports, and AIA billing, and tracking retainage, and all the things that all of us in the industry know are critical to our success. But the kind of generic solutions don't handle. So I was in various roles within that company for about 10 years and developed a great relationship with ComputerEase, and then took an opportunity 25 or so years ago now to go to work for ComputerEase and run the business for ComputerEase, and then about 5.5 years ago we were fortunate enough to be acquired by Deltek, and I've continued in my role now running the ComputerEase business unit under Deltek. But what I love is working with contractors every day, helping them get a solution that's really going to help them better run their business. And it's such a great business, I think, construction, but it's so unique, and you really need to work with people. And whether it's CPAs like yourself, Katina, that specialize in working with contractors, or software providers like us here at Deltek ComputerEase, I just think it really helps a construction company if they're working with people that really understand their business.
Yes, absolutely. It's such a unique industry as far as everything they need to keep track of and what they need to do, not only from a reporting and compliance perspective, for tax returns and bonding and all those kinds of things, but also just to better manage their businesses, to become better estimators and estimate their jobs better, be able to track all those things. And I know ComputerEase has been one of my favorites because I felt like it had really good controls around the data inputs, mostly because, if you don't put the data in correctly, garbage in, garbage out, right? Something that you really can't control in other non-industry specific software. ComputerEase does a great job of making sure that the right types of costs are being required to go to a job, and the other types of costs don't go to jobs when they're really overhead costs and things like that. So just having those control functions built into the system is hugely valuable and definitely something that's needed. So All right, so we'll talk a little bit here about, and we indicated a few things about why construction businesses require industry-specific software. But can you, maybe elaborate on that a little bit more based on your background and experience?
Yeah, I think, one, and I think we kind of touched on some of it already, but the ability to look forward based on information to date. I mean, it's certainly relevant after a job is over to add up and see how we did, but it doesn't
Sure.
give us any data to make, kind of in game or during the job decisions, proactive decisions to help us, get to the, maximum profitability. And too many times with with the generic solution, you're doing, you got disconnected systems. Maybe you're doing your job cost outside of your accounting system, and maybe after the fact, you somehow come to the determination whether you made money or not. But when when you've got a purposely built solution for your business, you should be able to see where we're at. If I've already used 50% of the budget, but I've only done 40% of the work, that's a red flag. I mean, I'm not over budget yet, but it's a good indicator that I'm going to be over
Right.
budget. And too many times, I find that contractors, if they don't have the right solution, they're spending all the time trying to gather the data. They have no time left to actually use and analyze the data. And I know that's where certainly, people like, your team, Katina, like to come in and say, you want to come in and be able to consult with them on what we should do going forward, make better business decisions, not trying to, put all the data together just to get to that, to get to the answer and now it's probably too late to do anything with the answer.
Right. I mean, because like you're in your example, if you're looking at a job and you think you don't know if you're going over budget or not if you don't have the right data in place, first of all. So if you get that right data, it's in front of you every day, real time information going into the system. And you're able to be like, okay, let's see, why are we running over? Was it just a bad bid and we're just going to have to deal with it? But we at least know what
Right.
the situation is. We can make changes to our bidding process right away and do those kinds of things. Or maybe what I've seen happen a bit is, we've got a little bit of that scope creep on the contract. Like we're doing some extra things that somebody didn't stop and say, hey, we need a change order, so we, call that into question. Are we doing some stuff that wasn't in the initial bid? Do we need to be getting a change order approved and get some additional billing going along with that? And it helps to catch those types of things earlier on in the job. And then, just looking at where else are we maybe just being inefficient that we can improve our efficiencies on that job
Yeah. You,
before
you
it's
know, you
over.
met Sure. Yeah. I mean, you
Right.
mentioned change orders, and that's a great example because too many times I find that, you know, without the right solution, we end up treating change orders as an after the fact recording of a document that's been signed when really we need to be tracking it from the time we introduce or make the request for change. And,
Right.
too many times, I mean, because as we all know in construction, a lot of times, we're starting to do some of the work even before we get that signed document back. So I need to track that. And I've talked to a lot of contractors, and without the right tools in place to track that, they're walking away from change order work because they didn't have it tracked. They weren't documenting it. So I think change order is just a great example of things we need to be able to track from the time we initiate it, not wait until we actually get a document and treat it as a kind of after the fact recording of it. No, we need to track it from the time we initiate that. And those are just some of the unique things. And I know we talked a little bit about the WIP process and the WIP schedule, and too many times I just hate when I ask a contractor, how often do you produce a WIP schedule, and they say, well, only when I have to. And I'm like, wow, that's just really such a bad answer to me, because yes, when you're asked to do it, maybe you're going to the bank and they want to see not only your financial but the WIP schedule that supports it, or the bonding agent or the surety underwriter want to see that. But what
Right.
about just the great tool it is to help you manage your business and see where you're headed? That's just, are we overbuilt? Are we underbuilt? Are we
Right.
forecasted to be ahead, under budget or over budget at the end of the job? And even though we're not there yet, and I really, I always tell contractors, the answer should be, I do this on a regular basis to run my business. And yes, when outside entities want the WIP schedule, I already have that because I'm
Right.
I'm using it to better manage my business, not because you want me to put one together for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great education piece, and we are very proactive when it comes to educating our clients. And a lot of times they come just like you said, they have this approach of it's a necessary evil of, accounting is a necessary evil, WIP schedules are a necessary evil. And yes, if you treat them that way, sure, they sure can be, but they can also be so much more than that. Such a wonderful management tool if you're using them regularly, if you're analyzing them, if you're taught, right? I mean, these are construction contractors and, I don't know how to build a house or I don't know how to, do the things that they do, right? But they need some education too in that direction. Like most of our contractors didn't come up with the financial background, right? So they need to understand, how to make this work for them, how to make it improve, their business, grow their business, et cetera. So we try to come alongside them too as they're going through this growth phase and show them how to really use this data, this information, these reports on a day-to-day basis to help better manage and control their business, especially when they get to larger sizes where they can't be everywhere looking at everything, right, that's going on. They need to control a little more from a remote position. So educating them in that direction, that really what accounting is all about is really designed to benefit management of the company, right? Yes, it's used for taxes. Yes, it's used for bond, other things that we have to use it for. But really what accounting is supposed to be is to be better management of your business, right? Going forward and using that information. And in a business as complex as construction, when it comes to accounting and the requirements, they're having a system that helps control that data and gives you reliable outputs of that information is a huge thing. And it takes a lot less manual manipulation and, things that you have to do to get to that point. Whereas if you're not using an industry specific software, a lot more labor goes into it. And I'm sure most of our contractors know that labor is the biggest expense, right? So anything that we can do to limit that labor input is going to make us a more efficient, profitable business. So for sure.
Yeah, you can get there, quote unquote manually if you're using a generic solution and a bunch of spreadsheets, and you can get there, but it's so time consuming that a lot of times you won't do it, and that's a problem, and just the ability to have what I will call real-time job costing. And I think even the definition of that has changed over the years. When I started in construction, real-time job costing meant after we processed payroll this week for last week's labor hours and posted them to our system, that was real time, because that was the best tools we had. We didn't have any other way to do it. Where today, with the field tools that are out there, you have a purposely built solution. We're recording time on a daily basis. It's coming into the accounting job costing, coming into the office. It's posted on your job cost report as pending labor cost. They've already worked the hours. It is going to be actual cost next week when we process payroll. But I've had contractors just looking at things completely different way now, when they can see those hours today and not have to wait until a week plus until they actually see those hours. And those are just some of the things that when you're using a solution that understands your challenges, that it's constantly evolving, and it's allowing you to keep up with those things. And I know a lot of, especially the labor intensive contractors, they love the fact that they can see those labor hours on the job at the end of the day today, not have to wait until payroll's posted next week.
Yeah, that's a huge step forward for sure, definitely. And like you said, as time has progressed and systems have gotten better, they more and more real time. Like yesterday's information is right in front of you, so that's great that you don't have to wait for that turnaround. And moving away from those manual systems too, in addition to the timeliness and like you said, the effort that you have to put into it, and a lot of times doesn't happen because it's not felt as a priority when you got to get out there and get the jobs, and definitely have to prioritize things. And in addition to that, the error rate is much higher typically, right? Any manual process is going to have that error rate much higher. You have to be very careful. You have to put a lot of checks and double checks and things in place when you do those manual processes, because you can have a error in an Excel formula, and it can sometimes then get duplicated, and then really your whole schedule's off. So you have to really be careful with those things.
That one error sends you down a chasing after that, and it just can be very problematic. And I know you mentioned something earlier that I thought was just a great point. With a generic solution, we take balancing the job cost in general ledger for granted, because any purposely built solution should certainly do that. You can't post to a
Yes.
job without going to the cost of goods section. You can't go to an overhead account and also post it to a job. But with the generic solution, that concept isn't there. And I'm sure you've seen just the same way I have. You go in, you're like, wow, what is this? You're looking at somebody's, their financials, and you're like, well, this doesn't even come close to balancing to your job cost. And where do we
Yeah.
start? And you got to unpack all that. And just,
Yep.
those are that. And then certainly the retainage is another big thing. And, with
Oh
like I said,
yeah. Huge.
great industry that we work in. We work on slim profit margins, and a lot of that profit is tied up in the retainage. And if we're not managing that, we don't know the unbilled retainage on each job, and we manage that through, make sure we work to actively reduce the retainage throughout the life of the job, and then ultimately get the final retainage payment. And there's a lot that goes into tracking that, and it's easy to walk away from that. The job's
Sure.
quote unquote over, and there's this one last little retainage payment out there. Well, guess what? That is a lot of our profit is sitting out there, and we
Right.
gotta see it through to completion. And you need the right tools to manage everything, from certainly the punch list and the closeout documents and all the things we need to produce that we got to sign off on before they're going to release that last payment.
Yep. Yeah. Lots of processes and procedures around that. And, also makes me think too of like cash flow. Like that's a big deal. Cash flow side of this business can be very tough. I mean, you're paying your labor, you're paying your materials, you're doing all those things. You want to be making sure that you're really billing as timely as you can, really leveraging that WIP
Yeah.
report to make sure that you're keeping those underbillings in control and not getting too far out on that you are billing your retainage as soon as you can bill it and get that money in the door, because you want to make sure that you keep your cash flow going in the positive direction for the business too. And we do work with clients to do cash flow projections too, so they can be on top of that, because it definitely can sneak up on you, and you need to watch the cash flow. And again, that on time data, right? That real time
Yeah.
data makes a big difference for cash flow projections, and knowing, hey, are we going to make payroll this week, next month? Are we going to have a blip in the road somewhere? We're projecting forward our backlog jobs coming through, and monitoring that and making sure we know if we're going to hit a blip in the road, and maybe it's winter, and gosh, we had to shut down for a week on this job or something like that. We need to kind of have some game plans for that, set up reserves, make sure that we're watching cash flow. But again, just all these processes working together for the best betterment of the company impacts a lot of things. Impacts, like you said, profitability, impacts cash flow. I mean, you could be very profitable if you don't get that money in the door, still going to be a problem. So have to manage
It
all
is.
that. Sure.
We all know how challenging, like you said, the cash flow can be. And we have to, it's not an option not to make payroll every week. I mean, we can control some of our expenses when they're paid, but payroll is a lot of times is a big
Yeah.
piece of our cost. And every job, we got a lot of money going out the door before money ever starts coming in. And every job's going to start in a negative cash position, but we want to manage that and be able to see that get to at least a break even or a cash positive position sooner rather than later. And so having the right tools. So I always look at the WIP schedule, and also the the true cash in, cash out, so I can say, okay, in the course of I'm underbilled, there's a pretty good likelihood I'm going to see negative cash position on that job. So we
Right.
want to make sure we're managing those hand in hand, and they really do go hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And watching how, and, all this folds back. We like to take this, strategic look at everything and make sure that we're, tackling things strategically. And part of that is this feedback loop coming from the accounting system and, looking at, like you said, the cash, looking at the timing of things, and, feeding that back into how we're structuring our contracts potentially too, as much as we can do that as well. Make sure we're getting enough for mobilization, and we're hitting milestones at a good time that we can do billings that flips that cash as quickly as possible to a positive situation. So it comes back to not just, oh, it's accounting and it's reporting, but it's coming back into how do we better our processes, maybe better our contracts, how we structure our contracts to help the flow of business in the right direction, cash flow, et cetera, so that we're not scrambling, for cash and looking for money to pay payroll. As you said, we don't have a choice. We got to pay payroll. So to make sure that we, are doing things that help on the front end too with those types of things as well.
Yeah, you really want to think about, I always, for us, it was always, we really spent a lot of time when we put together our schedule of values, and we strategically, we wanted to make sure that we had the right things, and maybe we weighted a little bit more of the things that were going to be done on the front end so that we could help improve that cash flow. And, and if you don't think about that, you don't have the right tool that can relate that to job costing, that can be very difficult to do.
Right, for sure, definitely. All right, so we talked a little bit about generic accounting systems, and I just wanted to come back around to, the failure in most accounting systems, as you alluded to, is tying the job revenues, expenses, and profitability in with the overarching P&L of the business. And so, if you, say, for example, or in QuickBooks, a lot of people start in QuickBooks. It's a very popular place to start. And it's a great place to start when you're starting, right? I think.
When you're small, I think it's I would agree. I mean, that's why
so,
a lot of
and it does
a lot of people start there.
Yeah, it does have some capabilities of job costing, but the problem is it's not controlled, right? So,
Right.
There's no control. It's very easy to make mistakes. If you run a P&L by job, most of the time we walk into a contractor who's been using that and starting to maybe outgrow it. Most of the time we walk in there and then we run the regular P&L for the whole business, and P&L by job, and nothing ties.
Right.
So, because they haven't gone through the process of making sure, and then you're digging through costs and you're digging through, billings to make sure that it's tied to the right jobs and things like that, trying to get it all tied out. But that's probably that's one of the biggest things that I see. Billings, retainage issues, those are difficult to manage as well in these non-industry specific areas. And so those are big words. A program like ComputerEase forces those things to be in balance. They don't let you not be in balance. So
Right.
they put these guardrails around the data inputs to make sure that those things stay where they're supposed to be. So are there any others that you would draw out as the weaknesses in these non-construction?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you made a good point there. I think certainly the way, and the best way I always like to describe it is with the solution like QuickBooks, at best job costing is kind of an afterthought. With the solution like ComputerEase, job cost is at the center of what we do, which is why you have all those guardrails, all the proper processes in place to manage that. And I think that's certainly one of the many reasons to go to an industry specific solution. The other thing is certainly construction payroll, and depending on what part of the country you're in, this can be more difficult than other parts of the country. But just in general, I think payroll is difficult in general, no matter what business you're in. But then construction payroll takes it to a whole nother level when, you've got to manage union payroll. You have to, maybe you're a non-union contractor and you're doing prevailing wage work. Either union or non-union have to produce certified payroll reports. You may have somebody working on the same job on the same day, getting paid different pay rates based on the activity they performed. I'm on a piece of equipment, so I got to be paid operator rate. I'm down on the ground, I'm paid laborer rate. Or maybe I'm on a different job from day to day, or maybe in the morning I'm on a prevailing wage job, and in the afternoon I'm on a non-prevailing wage job, paying different rates. And then you add in there the complexity when you get into parts of the country where we have not only state taxes, but you get into the areas where you have local payroll withholding tax, and every job I go to could be in a different tax locality, and I have to manage all of those pay rates. And that's I'm in the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, and the tri-state area here, and I could when I was back in construction, we had jobs in all three states going on at the same time. I may have somebody, because within 15 minutes I can cross between the three states. I'm going to cross who knows how many different municipalities that all have different payroll withholding rules. Yeah, and the job drives that. My work location moves, day to day, and with the right system, the job is set up to control all that. I know you've worked on this job, which is in Ohio. It's in the city of Cincinnati. It's a prevailing wage job, and it's going to automatically apply all the right rates and tax withholding rules. And I've had a lot of people using a solution like QuickBooks, and that they're doing all that manually. And in some cases, they really have they're not doing it properly because it's too cumbersome to do.
It's very complex, extremely. Yes, I've definitely run into that as well. So yeah, great point on that. And a couple other things that we mentioned briefly. AIA billing and handling those types of billings and things. A lot of people, you can't really do it in QuickBooks. You got to kind of do it outside and plug it in,
the system,
that kind of thing. So that's another big one. And then of course the reports that we've been talking about, like all the job costing reports. There's a few in QuickBooks, but not nearly as powerful as what you get in ComputerEase. No whip schedule in QuickBooks at all. Things like that. So definitely more reporting.
Managing the committed costs. When I write a purchase order contract, I see that committed to the job. I mean, that's a big thing that you just don't see. And outside of a industry specific solution where if I write a purchase order for $10,000 against the line item that has a $10,000 material budget, that budget's been spent for all intents and purposes, has been spent. And if I don't see that committed cost, so I think the tracking of the committed cost is a big item. Yeah. It is very common in construction that we have material come back from the job. Well, I need to manage that. So even if I don't have quote unquote inventory, I may have excess material, in the shop. So all those things are important. And then the one for certain contractors, if they, if you have any of your own equipment, maybe you're, depending on the type of work you're doing. And if you have large equipment and you're not allocating the cost for the use of your own equipment to the job, you're not going to have accurate job cost reports. And just, not only certainly maintaining the maintenance and repair schedules for the equipment, that's big too. So I can make intelligent decisions on when it's time to retire a piece of equipment as an example, but properly allocating costs. Because, the best example I can always give people is imagine if you had two jobs and they both needed a backhoe and you went and rented one and you owned one and you used the one you owned on the other job. Well, when you get the invoice for the one you rented, you're probably going to code that or charge that to the job you used it on. Well, if you don't charge the job for the use of the one that you own, and then you want to compare job cost reports, that's not an accurate picture. So yeah, really important that we not only track the maintenance and repair and location of all of our equipment, but also properly allocate the cost, especially on the large equipment to the job.
Yeah. So, and we'll get a technical, you kind of brought up something we haven't touched on yet, but our direct versus indirect costs, which is kind of what you're alluding to on the equipment side. That's an indirect allocation that we're doing there. So we have kind of our cost pools of direct costs. So those things that are specifically identifiable to the job, like we're talking about labor hours of the guys working or the gals working on that job. We've got specific materials that we're buying for that job, those kinds of things. So those are our directs. But then we have this indirect, cost pool that we also need to be allocating up, things like, maybe workers' compensation is in there, depreciation expense on our equipment, things like that. So we need to be having a good system of costing those indirect costs up to the jobs, like you said, to make sure we're capturing all job related costs, even if they're not directly identifiable to that job. In other ways they are, like you said, equipment hours, usage allocations, potentially there's different methodologies that you can use, but having an ability to be able to do that within the system, especially by hours or otherwise, super important. Otherwise, again, you're back to the manual spreadsheets, manual journal entries, gigantic, huge journal entries that take a long time to do. Ask me how I know. So, things like that. So having a system that just automates a lot of those things. And again, in real time, not, you have to wait for somebody to process things, it's doing it automatically. You set it up and it does it. It's very helpful, and you get, much better data and information right away, as we discussed.
Yeah. You talk, Katina, about like labor costs. And as we all know, the total cost of the labor hour is not just the X per hour we pay the employee. You got to add in all the burden, the FICA FUTA SUTA workers' comp expense, the fringe benefits if we're paying fringe benefits, and that total labor cost is significantly more than the per hour rate. And if you're not using that fully burdened cost when you're estimating the next job, I've seen a lot of contractors, the hours were okay, but the rate was wrong, and they started in a hole before they ever started the job because they didn't use the right rate. And having real time visibility into that. What is our fully burdened rate, as we'll call it, which is the total
Yeah.
cost per hour of labor. And that's really important that we're, because you could be under on the hours but over on the rate and still be be over budget. So
Right.
you really got to be able to look at that and be able to dig in and analyze, did we have the rate wrong? Did we somehow miss the rate?
Yeah.
And and make sure that we make that correction going forward.
Yeah, and we want to keep it up to date too, because some things don't change. Some of those payroll taxes at least haven't changed in a long time as far as percentages. But gosh, health insurance changes quite a bit.
Absolutely,
things
Sure.
like that. So we need to make sure that we're also, even if we had a set rate and it's working for a while, we need to be monitoring that. Make sure we don't need to be updating those rates, or I shouldn't say make sure we're updating those rates when we need to, because it's for sure going to happen. And we need
sure
to
they're
make sure
current.
that we're staying on that. So when we're putting new job estimates out, it has all that information in it, and we're not underbidding inadvertently, on those jobs and getting ourselves in a problem. Definitely. So okay, great. Well, lots of great information there. So one of the things that we wanted to talk a little bit about was successfully implementing a new accounting system. So, if you're on QuickBooks or you're on some other non-industry specific software and you move into something like ComputerEase, what's a good, success plan to move in that direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, the number one thing I always tell people is, commit to your why. Remember why you're doing this. And nobody likes to change. We're all, just kind of human nature. We nobody likes change. So, but if you remember why you're doing it and the benefits of the change, that little bit of disruption or the little bit of work that has to go into a conversion, because no change comes without I had to get a new phone the other day, and I waited so long because I just hated the thought of changing phones. But now that I have my new, it's like, wow, this is great. I'm taking advantage of all the new features, and it's no different whether things we do in our personal life versus changing accounting system. But just remember why we're doing it. Get buy-in from everybody. It's got to be kind of come from the top down. We all have to buy in. I mean, I love when I'll talk with with contractors and say, okay, John, really want your team to meet with everybody that's going to be involved in this. So, and while I may be talking to the quote unquote decision maker, but I think that the best decision maker will say, okay, let's get the right people involved in this and make sure they have visibility into why we're doing this. And if everybody buys into it, remembers why we're doing it, and commits to that, it'll be it's a pretty smooth transition. I mean, it's especially when you take a company like Deltek ComputerEase and the ComputerEase team. I mean, that's what we're experts at doing. We love when we get involvement from the customer's CPAs, people like yourself, Katina. So, okay, maybe now's the time to look at revamping the chart of accounts as an example, because we're making the change from QuickBooks. We're using something that was there from the beginning, and now we've advanced. Maybe we have maybe we want to track the P&L down at a department level, location, work type, whatever it may be. Just things that maybe we didn't do when we started out small. But so we always want to get buy-in from everybody, not only the team in the contractor's office, but let's talk to their outside CPA as well and see if there's things. Let's work as a team and put together a good path forward. And if we do that and work together, the transitions are great. And in a very few short months, everybody's saying, wow, this is just great. And we put in a little bit of effort to get here, but now look at all the benefit we're getting from that.
Yeah. I think having a clear path to the transition. I mean, I think all of what you said is extremely important. You got to have everybody buying in and pushing in the same direction. You can't be fighting each other trying to get this to happen and whatnot. And I think having a good discussion or a couple up front of what is the ultimate structure and goal that we're going for and the options that we have available, and having that structure decided. And that's something that we can definitely help with, that we've helped a lot of clients with in transition to make it go more smoothly. I mean, there's always bumps in the road in any transition. That's why we don't like it, right? It's always a little challenging, but the more upfront deciding, okay, this is like you said, this is the chart of accounts we want to use now. This is the job number structure that we want to use for our job numbers. This is the or naming, whatever it might be. This is, we want divisions. These are divisions we want to track, departments, divisions, however you want to refer to them as, locations. So if we if we think through some of that strategy, just like anything else, strategize first and think through that strategy,
Yes.
map out the map, get a plan in place for the transition, which things are going to happen when, have a little bit of a, kind of a project management, goals. So just like kind of in construction, like what's the phases, we're going to go through, right? What's the milestones we're going to hit and when, and, what do we think we can accomplish? It definitely helps the success of a transition tremendously. And I do recommend, as you're saying too, that you have obviously guide from the software side, helping you with, of course, the new software, new ways of doing things a little bit, every system's a little bit different, but also involving your CPA upfront is very valuable. Unfortunately, we've come on the back end of some of these things. And then you have to go, okay, now we need to restructure all these things because it's not doing what we need. So the more upfront information and planning, just like, those construction contracts, right? Same idea. You do all that stuff up front, it's going to go way smoother.
Yeah, much easier if we do it up front. And the other thing too is we talk about laying out that roadmap. It's no different than in a lot of ways in a construction schedule. And we got to remember, we don't necessarily have to bite off everything at once. We may be moving from, say, QuickBooks to ComputerEase, and then we're also going to be adding some things that we weren't doing in QuickBooks. Well, the first step is let's do what we were doing in QuickBooks in ComputerEase, and then we can start layering in things like maybe we weren't tracking cost on the equipment as an example. Okay, that doesn't have to happen in the initial phase. So,
right.
They're just, remember, and I think the best implementations go that way. Let's get out of our old system into the new system and then start layering in the additional benefits of the new system. And that, because if you try to bite it all off at once, it can seem overwhelming and sometimes can delay the entire process and make it difficult to get to that first stage. So let's do it in different phases and get to phase one, which is let's get disconnected from our old system. Okay, now let's start adding on top of that all these wonderful new features that we're going to take advantage of.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, because definitely you want to make sure you're taking things in stride as you go. You have a plan, but you phase it in and get people used to working in the system. And because there's a lot of change, for those people too, right? That they're going through. So, working through it in phases. They're used to doing X on things. They're going to be doing it in a different system, but similar process. So you're not changing a whole lot of stuff for them then. And then you start laying in some additional changes as we increase the value of the data set, that we're going to be working with and the functions and features of the software for sure. So I think that's a great point as well. So, all right. So the last kind of question we had in here to discuss a little bit about is how can construction companies measure the return on investment after upgrading to their new accounting software?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to measure is certainly the visibility into real-time job costing and the better day-to-day decisions you're able to make. So if all of a sudden I can say, wow, I used to not get this information until after the job was over. I'm now getting it, all throughout the job. That's a big, that's a big indicator. If I can improve my cash flow because I have better visibility into the cash flow, that's another one. Then certainly, reducing the amount of time spent on manual efforts, which now should free up, the talent in the office team to do other productive things because I'm not spending all the time gathering data. I'm now spending time analyzing the data and using that to make better day-to-day decisions. So I think those are the things that I always look for, and then certainly, I guess one other thing I throw in there is certainly, better management of your construction payroll and running into fewer problems because you now have a system that was built to manage all those things for you. You're paying the right rates, you're withholding the right taxes, and you're producing your certified payroll reports, et cetera, on time.
Yeah. And we all know payroll mistakes are very costly mistakes to make.
Yes, that can be very costly.
Lots of unpleasantness around those types of things for sure. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think you're going to feel it in that you're using your data more in a proactive way, like you're saying. So that's, I think, a huge way to measure that return on investment. Now you're proactively using that data to make changes on a regular basis to improve the profitability of the company and the growth of the company. And I think you're going to definitely see a lot more smoothing out of processes and procedures that you were doing in probably a likely much more manual way before, if you were even doing some of these things, which you may not have been prior to coming into the software. So I think you'll feel that, or at least that's what we've seen, is they feel that smoothing out of processes. So whether it's payroll or billing or retainage or controlling costs on jobs, just having that smoother feel of reporting and what they're actually having to do and input into the system. So.
Yeah, I think the big thing, is you start talking about here's where we are and where we're headed versus here's where we were. So, when you start to flip that and you're looking forward instead of behind you to see where you were, that kind of changes the whole picture for the company. And we're because we have the system and all this great data, now we can project where we're headed based on the information we have, and that's a much better feeling than finding out where how we did after the fact.
Right, absolutely, because now you have something you can act on, and,
Yes.
and whether that's changing your bidding process for other jobs or just acting on making this one more profitable and heading off problems that are coming down the pipe, huge benefit for sure with regards to that. So, well, thanks so much, John, for joining me today and talking about this. I think it's super important for people to get a better understanding when they're in this field of, what they might be missing and how to get to that next level in their business, in their construction business. So I appreciate your input and thoughts and, all the history you have and experience in this. So is there anything else you would like our listeners to keep in mind?
Yeah, no, just enjoyed the conversation. I'm always like talking shop and talking about construction. So yeah, really, like I said, I would just remind everybody. I mean, this is just such a great, valuable podcast that you bring to the industry, and it's not only certainly work with the technology companies like Deltek ComputerEase, but certainly you want to work with CPA firms and CPAs like yourself, Katina, that really understand their business. I mean, if you surround yourself with people that know your business, you're gonna really have a much better chance for success.
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, so if you're interested in finding out more, you can definitely take a look at our show notes and replay this podcast, share it, etc. We are partnered with Deltek as well, so happy to, get the process rolling for you. If you're interested in finding out more information, feel free to reach out to us. So, thank you for your time today, and keep that momentum going, and we will see you next time.